My boy emptied out my savings and jetted off to Rome with his spouse and her mom. I simply grinned inwardly, and sure enough, 3 days on, he rang me up in tears. "Mom, what on earth did you pull?" My payback was sealed. The moment I craved a breather more than ever turned out to be the exact instant my son swiped every last cent, not even bothering with a goodbye message. Eleanor Ellie Price sat motionless for what felt like ages. She perched on her faded fabric recliner, the very one she'd purchased back when Jackson hit 7, funded by her initial solid wage from scrubbing houses in the Hollywood Hills. Before her eyes, the smartphone display lit up with the alert that sent ice through her veins. Balance remaining, $0. She scanned it repeatedly, even a fourth go-around. Her fingers shook. Not due to her 68 years of resilience, but from a profound twist in her gut, the kind that hits when your spirit grasps the truth while your emotions dig in their heels. She dialed the bank. An automated voice picked up first. Then a staffer started probing. They explained the transactions occurred digitally, hefty wire sends adding up to more than $80,000. That sum represented her whole career's toil, her nest egg, her fallback, her sole cushion against hardship. "And the destination of those funds?" she inquired, her tone cracking, like she already suspected but required confirmation from an outsider. Every bit went to an account under Jackson Arthur Price. "Ma'am," the agent responded coolly, "would you like to report this as fraud?" Ellie stayed silent. She ended the call abruptly. Quiet enveloped the home. All that broke it was the kitchen clock's steady tick and the faint hum of a flickering fluorescent bulb nearing its end. Beyond the windows, the ice cream vendor's melody chimed on, unaware of the chasm yawning within her. Next, the antique landline buzzed, the one she clung to from sheer routine. "Hello," she uttered tonelessly. "Ellie, oh, Ellie, sweetie, have you checked out your Jackson's Instagram?" It was Doris, her chatty longtime neighbor, bubbling with enthusiasm. "He's in Rome, darling, dining on gourmet delights alongside his wife and her mother. Goodness, their lifestyle is glamorous. They could pass for silver screen icons." Ellie forced down a lump. For a split second, her essence drifted away. She shuffled toward her bedroom, pulled open the drawer hiding her outdated mobile, and hunted for her boy's page. Social platforms weren't her scene, yet she lurked on his feed from afar, like a stranger gazing into a home that had slipped from her grasp. And there he appeared. Jackson, her sole child, the infant she'd birthed amid agony and nurtured solo after his dad abandoned her for someone else. The identical offspring she'd sacrificed for endlessly, including handing over the ancestral property from her folks to finance his education. He beamed in the shot, clutching a drink, clad in a sharp white button-down, arms around Tanya, his partner, and Rhonda, the in-law who forever sneered at Ellie. The post's words, "Rome, my fresh start. I earned this." Tanya's comment below, "Rewards arrive for the patient. Grateful for it all, mother-in-law," paired with a cash symbol. Ellie held back tears. No outbursts, no shattered objects. She merely gripped the device as if it scorched her palm. Then, unseen by all, a smile crept across her face. Not the warm kind, but one born of dawning clarity, like she'd at last confronted a truth dodged for decades. Miles off beneath overcast Roman skies and amid ancient stone paths, Jackson toasted carefree. "Look," Tanya murmured over pricey vino, "snagging that cash was smart. She's not long for this world regardless. Might as well enjoy it now instead of it vanishing on hospital fees." Her mom, Rhonda, barked a cruel chuckle. "That oblivious fossil. She wouldn't know an airplane if it landed on her. Never would have put that fortune to real use." Jackson kept mum. His gaze sparkled at the Colosseum, yet an unease stirred in his core, though he stifled it, just like back in his youth when hunger gnawed and his mom soothed. "Hang tight, kiddo. Tomorrow it'll come." That evening, Ellie's walls felt ancient and weary. Items sat unchanged, but the air had shifted utterly. Shelves held snapshots of Jackson, tiny in daycare, suited up for junior high's first day, beaming with his university degree. Every choice she'd made revolved around him. At 18, she pawned her wedding band to cover his senior year tuition. At 23, she deeded him the homestead her father bequeathed. At 30, she chipped in for the nuptials, despite Tanya's disdain. Ellie had prepared his meals, laundered his garments, tidied his messes, yet he pulled away more with time. "Mom, this era's beyond you," he'd brush off. "Life doesn't work like in your day. Tanya and I aim high, and yeah, kid, you're woven into those ambitions. I'll cherish you forever, Ma, but I can't drag you along indefinitely." Just a week prior to unearthing the treachery, Ellie had swung by Jackson's place in Studio City. She'd arrived with a platter of her signature crispy chicken, and Ellie whipped up a batch of collard greens from scratch. She pressed the doorbell. Nobody answered. She lingered in the scorching heat, perched on a bench for 2 full hours before the doorman finally came over. "Are you here for Mr. Jackson Price?" "Yes, I'm his mom." "Oh, right. I got orders not to allow you inside without prior notice." Ellie swallowed hard. "And what's the reason for that?" "Can't say, ma'am. That's just the directive I received." She trudged back to her place on foot. She skipped the subway ride. She craved the breeze against her cheeks, no matter how stifling and grimy it felt. Her mind replayed all the meals she'd skipped, the extra hours she'd logged at dawn, the dollars she'd scrimped away for her boy. That evening, Doris dropped by. She arrived with a pecan pie and some fresh brew. "You've always had that inner strength, Ellie. Don't let this shatter you. Jackson's still young. He might wise up eventually." Ellie let out a heavy sigh, her eyes lost in thought. "Do you reckon kids ever look back with remorse, Doris?" "Absolutely they do. Once their mom's out of the picture, it all hits them. I just hope he figures it out before it's too far gone. So, what's your plan?" Ellie lifted her head. A new fire gleamed in her eyes, something absent until now. "I'm going to grin exactly as they showed me." Doris knit her brows. "Grin. How so?" "I've shed plenty of tears, Doris. From here on, I'll smile quietly. I've got zero to lose anymore. And a woman with nothing at stake. She's a force to reckon with." Over in Rome, dusk was settling in. Jackson had just emerged from the shower when Tanya's voice drifted from the balcony mid-call. "Yeah, we pulled it off. The old woman's clueless. Cash is secured. Come morning, we'll set up the account in Spain and ditch Jackson." "Sure thing. He believes we're partners in crime." What an idiot. Jackson froze. He stayed put. The droplets on his body turned icy. He kept silent. He returned to the bedroom like nothing had registered. He slid under the covers beside Tanya, who feigned slumber. He shut his eyes, unaware that a shift had occurred, and the real trouble loomed ahead. Meanwhile, back in South Central Los Angeles, Ellie brewed a mug of chamomile tea. Darkness hung heavy. Street lamps sputtered. Out on the road, strays scrapped over garbage. Within her walls, she grabbed her journal, the one for scribbling recipes she'd never tried. With trembling script, she jotted a note. "This isn't over. It's the start of my quiet resolve, and that quiet will sting worse than any outburst." She snapped the journal shut, climbed into bed, and for the first time in ages, she drifted off dry-eyed. As she rested in her modest dwelling, her son, holed up in a lavish Roman hotel room, glanced at his cell. A banking alert popped up. "Account frozen for irregular transactions." "What the?" he whispered, eyes glued to the display. The initial fracture had appeared, and Jackson had no clue his mother, in her wordless way, was already making her play. Pain doesn't always roar. Sometimes it lurks, watches, and bides its time, and that time was dawning. The night hadn't fully lifted from South Central. That clammy moisture still clung to the corrugated roofs and cracked pavement. Ellie rose with the first light, her joints protesting as always. Yet today she didn't feel worn down. A fresh pulse stirred within her. Not fury or grief. It was a steely will her spirit had never tapped before. As she ignited the burner on her stove, she fixed on the azure flicker. The kettle's shrill cry pulled her back decades to her initial taste of solitude. She'd been 14 when she began scrubbing homes in Brentwood. A kid with uneven plaits, deep complexion, and palms roughened by bargain detergents. By then, she'd memorized every spot cleaner and mastered crease-free folding for the employer's linens. Evenings upon returning, her mom was already out cold, no more staying awake. Her gone dad had bolted with some tavern lady. Ellie held back tears. She just gulped it down and beat the sunrise the following day to head out again. At 17, she conceived Jackson. His dad was a lad 3 years her senior. He'd vowed marriage, an escape from her grind. Their run lasted 8 months. The instant he learned it was a son, he vanished. He ran off with a makeup vendor and stayed gone. Ellie bit back sobs. She set her teeth, tied her kerchief tighter, and hunted for additional gigs, cleaning houses. She nurtured Jackson solo, hauling him in a sling while laundering strangers' garments. Once he toddled, she showed him games with soap bottle lids pretending they were vehicles. No playthings in their home, but plenty of tales. Empty fridge, yet warm broth. No TV, but lullabies she crooned till he dozed. He was her universe. When Jackson hit 6, a client of Ellie's proposed covering his private elementary tuition if she'd commit to round-the-clock shifts and on-site living. Ellie didn't. She paused to reconsider. Ellie had abandoned her old home and taken up residence in the cramped rooftop space provided by generous supporters. Each weekend, she made the trek across town to spend time with her boy. She always brought something along, perhaps a fresh journal or a simple treat. But more than anything, she offered an attentive ear for whatever Jackson needed to share. Time marched on and Jackson matured into a young man. Ellie labored to master signing her own name, her fingers shaking as she handled school forms to list herself as the guardian. She picked up reading skills for medical scripts and later for financial notices. Writing remained a challenge, yet she grasped enough to stand her ground, or at least believed she did. When Jackson turned 16, he vowed, "Mom, once I succeed, I'll get you a place where the chill doesn't creep through the cracks." Without missing a beat, she responded, "Save your money, child. Just promise you won't leave me behind." College arrived next. To cover the tuition, Ellie parted with the sole inheritance from her father, a modest plot in the Georgia countryside where she'd once envisioned a cozy retreat. She let it go for far less than its value, but as usual, she didn't waver. "My boy's headed for a career in accounting," she boasted to the folks next door. "He's breaking free from all this." And break free he did, though not in the way she'd pictured. During his 3rd year of school, Jackson crossed paths with Tanya, a woman boasting sleek locks, manicured fingers, and a grin straight out of a glossy ad. The moment Ellie laid eyes on her, a knot twisted in her gut. Not from resentment or spite, but from recognizing the self-serving gleam in Tanya's gaze, the kind that hoards without offering in return. Tanya hailed from a household that put on airs beyond their means. Her mom, Rhonda, sported counterfeit luxury outfits and chatted like she'd attended elite schools abroad. Their initial drop-in at Ellie's place brought veiled sneers. "Such a charming shade. These walls have real character," Rhonda remarked with a mocking lilt. Spotting the kitchen, Tanya muttered under her breath words that etched into Ellie's memory forever. "I can't imagine Jackson raising up in a spot like this. It feels more like a refuge than a real house." Ellie forced her usual grin, but deep down, a piece of her shattered. As the years rolled by, Tanya solidified her influence. She started by suggesting Ellie cut back on visits, then by silencing her input on their choices. Soon after, she barred her from select gatherings, claiming she didn't belong. Jackson, muddled by infatuation and uncertainty, gradually pulled away. One evening, now cohabiting with Tanya, Jackson showed up at his mother's unannounced, the final such surprise. She whipped up his beloved pot roast with gravy. "Mom, Tanya feels you're meddling too much, stifling our chance to build as partners," he said. Ellie eyed her cooling dish and murmured, All I want is your joy, my boy. He shot back, as if wounding her deliberately. I don't require your help any longer. I'm grown, and grown men move past those who shape them. No tears fell from Ellie. She simply rose, tidied the dishes, and urged him to grab the leftovers. The ensuing weeks brought a string of quiet rejections. Tanya seized control of Jackson's money matters, persuaded him to switch accounts, and urged secrecy from his mom. In her view, Ellie was out of touch, ill-equipped for today's world. Caught in a web of drive and subtle coercion, Jackson went along. Ellie started spotting oddities: a mismatched bank slip, missing bills, an unfamiliar insurance form. That's when she turned to Walter, her early sweetheart and longtime neighbor turned attorney. Now widowed, he dwelled in a cluttered flat, brimming with dusty files and echoes of the past. She approached him vaguely. "Walter, what's the way to check if folks are misusing my identity for shady dealings?" He probed gently. "Trouble brewing, Ellie." She shook her head. "No, but my boy's not himself these days." He studied her intently, pored over the scraps of paperwork she brought, and spent weeks dissecting transactions and records. Eventually, he summoned her over one evening. "Ellie, Jackson listed you as co-signer on a shared account. No real signature from you, but it's there all the same," she admitted. "I barely manage my name." "They faked it," he confirmed, "and they've siphoned funds steadily for 6 months." Ellie stayed mute. She folded the documents into her bag and departed wordlessly. Sleep evaded her that night, not over the cash, but the harsh reality. Her son wasn't merely swayed, he'd joined the deception willingly. He'd swindled his own flesh and blood. In the days that followed, Tanya and Rhonda plotted a jaunt to Rome. Jackson, jobless and unsteady, offloaded his vehicle and floated the idea of dipping into Ellie's nest egg. "It's kinfolk funds," Tanya insisted. "Plus, she won't miss it. Come on, don't overthink." He wavered. Unsure, it's her whole security. "And why's she sitting on it? Your family. This isn't theft. It's an advance on what's yours." Jackson wavered, yet he pulled it off. Late one evening from his personal PC, he shifted the entire sum. He acted swiftly, impulsively, much like extracting a molar sans numbing. Once done, he exhaled sharply, snapped the computer shut, and never glanced rearward. Ellie uncovered the disloyalty the following morning. No tears fell. No outbursts erupted. Instead, she jotted a single line in her journal. "My boy lives on, yet the part of me that mothered him perished." After that, the world tilted. Her frame continued to mature, but her essence toughened. Her gait altered, posture more erect. She commenced phoning contacts, scanning messages, dropping by buildings. A scheme was brewing. Meanwhile, in Rome, Jackson strolled the cobblestone paths, convinced of his triumph. Back in south-central Los Angeles, his mom was spinning the snare to reclaim all they'd stolen from her. And Tanya. She was already scheming her vanishing act, leaving no trail. What Jackson failed to grasp was that Ellie bore no resemblance to the figure etched in his memory. That version had vanished. In its stead lingered a scarred parent, vigilant now, and once such a parent stirs, no inferno daunts her. The treachery ceased to sting. The real ache came from realizing she'd been unseen, exploited, wiped away as if she'd never counted. But Ellie refused to fade quietly, for the secrets mothers bury can prove fatal too. Ellie uttered not a word. Not then, not later, not ever after. Her quietude had evolved beyond the sort that seeps inward. It turned keen, watchful, tallying, plotting. Utterance withered in her gullet, as if pointless now. For when a mother perceives she's been supplanted by pretense, she quits yelling. She evolves. Jackson overlooked the shift or chose to ignore it. He was consumed by the existence he'd fantasized about, one devoid of laundry's clean scent or morning brew, an existence where the summons stirring him wasn't "my little one," but "sir," polished, refined, hollow. Tanya embedded herself in his realm like its rightful ruler. He, spellbound, yielded. He was captivated by her lexicon, terms Ellie shunned, her poised stride in stilettos, her proprietary air toward possessions. Yet beneath her breezy chuckles and curated images lurked a sly, ruthless, exacting apparatus. Tanya pinpointed her desires and pursued them urgently. A title, a lineage, a bank balance, a partner to uphold her veneer. Initial barbs arrived cloaked in humor. "Darling, why must your mom weigh in on every detail?" she quipped, filing her nails in the den. "I refuse to raise our kid amid that low-end mindset." Jackson chuckled uneasily. "She doesn't mean to meddle. She's just struggling to release the reins. Always has. It's not reins, it's condescension masked as affection. Folks like your mom fancy themselves saints for solo parenting, oblivious that history doesn't entitle them to burden others. I won't allow that for you, me, or our future kids." Gradually, Tanya dictated their Ellie encounters, first claiming schedules clashed, then opting for neutral spots, ultimately deeming Ellie's home off-limits due to its stale odor. Jackson went along with it all, and whenever Ellie probed their rarer drop-ins, he'd avert his gaze. "Life's hectic, Ma. Work, the wedding prep, you get it." Ellie merely dipped her head, but innocence had fled her gaze. She was assembling clues, meticulously mending a ruptured bag by hand. Rhonda, Tanya's mom, soon meddled, steering clear of overt jabs but deploying polished barbs laced with sting. "Ms. Eleanor, forgive my candor, but have you considered relocating to a classier district? You're of an age now. This zone's risky for seniors, and with your nest egg, a nicer spot's within reach. No." Ellie met Rhonda's stare unflinchingly. She held silent, but inwardly something snapped. That instant, she saw it. They didn't seek distance. They never craved proximity. At a Sunday gathering lunch orchestrated by Tanya, Ellie chose to confront her boy. She bided until Rhonda stepped away to the lavatory and Tanya fixated on her device. She regarded Jackson with enduring warmth, though her tone held steady. "My child, are you certain this one's suitable? Ever catch her eyeing you when your back's turned?" Her remarks about me. Jackson gulped. Tanya glanced from her screen. Rhonda emerged from the facilities. The air thickened, akin to an approaching tempest. Then Jackson lost his temper. "That's it. Mom, you're envious because there's someone else in my world these days. You won't admit it, but deep down you believe it. You've always resented anyone who mattered to me besides you." Ellie stayed silent, offering no rebuttal. She didn't even blink. Instead, she dropped her eyes to her meal, set aside her utensils, and in that heavy quiet, she realized he'd slipped away from her. As they parted ways later that day, no embraces were exchanged. Back at her place, she slipped off her footwear gently, as though mindful of disturbing others, despite being by herself. Perched on her mattress, she pondered the final occasion her boy had uttered, "I love you," on his own initiative. The memory escaped her. The ensuing days turned into a nightmare, masked as everyday life. Tanya and Rhonda started dropping by Jackson's workplace more often. They'd deliver meals, discuss deals, and pitch funding ideas. Eventually, Tanya requested entry to his finances to streamline their domestic spending. "Have faith in me," she urged, shedding her top right there. "Or don't we make a pair?" Caught amid desire and poor judgment, Jackson agreed like usual. Ellie, on the other hand, refused to idle. She sensed trouble brewing, yet lacked proof. That's when she turned to her neighbor Brenda, a former accountant with 2 decades at a drug firm, now pensioned and tutoring local kids in basic math. "Brenda, could you help me understand this? How do I spot if accounts are being tampered with?" Brenda's brow furrowed. "Your boy." "Indeed. Can you view your statements? They bypass me now. And wire transfers. I've never initiated one. I wouldn't know where to start." Over a few evenings, Brenda guided Ellie through logging into the banking app on her device, scanning activity logs, and spotting inflows and outflows. The initial glimpse of the ledger hit Ellie like a collapse. Substantial sums, fresh timestamps, outflows matching Jackson's visits or paper requests, funds vanishing without cause. He gained entry, claimed it was for forms, mentioned insurance. Ellie, this isn't admin work, it's embezzlement. Her spirit shattered alongside, but tears held back. She requested a notepad and started logging each entry meticulously. Date, hour, figure. Every pilfered cent bore a label. One Friday evening, amid apparent despair, Brenda revealed another detail. Look at this entry. They forged your autograph to open a linked account, but it's a sloppy imitation. Ellie traced the display like a fresh scar. They scarcely tried to conceal it. Music? What's your plan? Ellie powered down her phone, inhaled deeply, and replied, nothing. For now. Over in Rome, unease crept into Jackson. Not remorse, but Tanya's shifting demeanor. She'd transformed. Her kisses lacked fervor. She scrolled endlessly on her gadget, chuckling alone. Rhonda, too, dropped any facade of patience. One evening, feigning slumber, he overheard their exchange. It's finished. Why drag out the act? Once we're home, we liquidate it all and cut him loose. If he catches on, he's dim. He won't catch wind. And if he does, big deal. The elderly woman's fading fast regardless. Who'd back him up? From Los Angeles, Ellie operated with calculated focus. She headed to a branch, demanded full records, had them copied and sealed in packets. Next, she checked the county office for assets tied to her name she hadn't authorized. There, a graver revelation awaited. Jackson had attempted to title her residence as a collaborative asset via falsified papers. A glitch blocked it, but the intent was clear. That afternoon, Ellie detoured from home. She strolled to a weathered chapel in the district's rear, not for supplication, but to rest on the pew and gaze at the sanctuary. Grant me endurance, Lord, not absolution for him, but restraint from my vengeance. Quietude surrounded her. Returning, she tuned the tuner to a melancholic tune and resumed her crafting. Yet this creation wasn't apparel. It was retribution. The roots of disloyalty had taken hold, sprouting steadily. Reaping time approached. Ellie sensed it. It pulsed in her core, in the draft slipping through the frame, as if heralding that suppressed truths would soon emerge. The wee hours lightened her load. Chill no longer nipped. She tallied the calendar, not in fret, but methodically, serenely, like honing a blade deliberately, aware of the precise strike ahead. One dawn, as she tidied the parlor with that enduring reed brush, she shifted the lounge chair to dust below. Underneath lay dye she rummaged through a jumble of small scraps, a parched ink pen, and a ragged, sloppily creased white envelope stuffed inside a reused plastic sack. Her instinct was to toss the whole mess without a glance, but an inner voice urged her to inspect it closely. She started by unzipping the bag. Nestled within lay a formal paper. She scanned it 2 times, struggling to grasp its meaning. It bore her complete name, her home address, and a scrawled mark resembling her own handwriting. Next, her eyes caught the title at the top. Final Will and Testament. A tight pressure gripped her ribcage. Dropping to the floor, she unfolded the sheet across her knees and pored over it once more. This was a legal document purporting to bequeath her residence and bank funds to Jackson upon her passing. At the very end, a forged version of her autograph. The home stillness pressed in, heavier than before. Just the rhythmic tick of clocks and a far-off canine's yaps pierced the hush. Tears didn't come. Shock had already faded, yet this revelation shattered a deeper part of her. Not the disloyalty itself, rather, its undeniable proof. She dialed Walter. Get here now. What's wrong? I've uncovered something you must examine. 2 hours on, Walter perched at her kitchen counter, scrutinizing the file with a grave expression. He flipped through it methodically, his head wagging in disbelief. This goes beyond unlawful. It's a real threat. Had he submitted it, your property might have slipped away unnoticed. Suspect it was Jackson. Walter fell quiet. He laid the sheet flat on the surface. That's no match for your handwriting, Ellie. Plus, you'd never know how to compose one of these. Clearly, it's fabricated. The gravest issue. This appears to be a rough version, implying a genuine push to register it might have followed. Ellie gazed down at her age-spotted palms, marked by decades, yet firm in their resolve. Memories flooded back of the moment she'd cleared the final house loan installment. 3 decades of toil, leftover dinners, frayed footwear, laboring through scorching afternoons, scrubbing strangers' filth, weathering supervisors' tirades, all for a possession that was truly hers, untouchable by others. "He aimed to erase me through ink," she stated evenly, her tone steady. Walter glanced her way. He couldn't tell if it was figurative or stark reality. Their shared quiet stretched so far that the percolating coffee on the burner filled the room as the sole noise. "So what's your next move?" Ellie curved her lips into that enigmatic grin Jackson had never deciphered promptly. "Now I'll put him in the ground while he's still breathing." Barely 3 days after that find, a surprise ring came from Dr. Evans, her regular internist at the clinic for routine exams. "Please stop by soon, Miss Eleanor, ideally today." Her knees quivered beneath her. She strode to the facility bearing the same poise she'd carried through life's trials. She stepped into the consultation room dressed in her everyday attire, shawl knotted securely, and her journal of medication logs in tow. The physician welcomed her warmly, though his eyes held a shadow of defeat. His expression carried a pity that hinted at endings. Fresh lab work came back unfavorable. She offered no reply, merely meeting his stare, braced for the inevitable. "You've developed leukemia, madam. It's progressed quite far. It hurts to deliver this bluntly, but delays aren't an option. Your defenses are weakened. We project roughly 6 months remaining." Ellie went rigid, her focus locked on a wall blemish resembling a tiny avian silhouette from moisture. No sobs, no inquiries. "Grasp what this means. I get the price of passing with grace." The doctor fidgeted in his chair. "Treatments exist. Chemotherapy could begin, though success isn't guaranteed. It's harsh and costly. Would it hasten the end? Not always. In that case, pass. I refuse to let mortality find me in hospital garb." The medic was at a loss for words. He'd rarely witnessed such serene acceptance of mortality's verdict. Ellie rose, gathered her bag, and paused at the threshold to face him. 6 months suffices. "For my unfinished business, it's ample time." Her return journey on foot wasn't due to thrift, but a craving to absorb the urban pulse. Each stride reconnected her to her origins, her past, her mission. She traversed the avenue where a vehicle had nearly struck her years ago, en route to dropping Jackson at kindergarten. She strolled by the bazaar where she'd mopped lavatories for $40 daily. She nodded to Mr. Theodore, the toothless vendor at the fruit cart, whose recall was sharp. Back at her dwelling, she headed directly to her bedroom. From beneath the mattress, she retrieved a concealed timber chest. Within rested her ledger of jottings, news cuttings, bills, anonymous missives, and a faded pouch holding the sole snapshot of young Jackson, curled asleep against her ankle. She studied it intently, then ignited the burner, set a pot for water, and as vapors curled upward, whispered to herself, "Prayers end here. Action starts." Her initial step was accompanying Walter to submit as a concerned citizen rather than a parent. She lodged a formal grievance. They documented the falsified signature, the bid to seize assets, and included supporting proof. Next, they sought an interim hold on the bank account Jackson had drained. For this, they invoked a provision permitting the halt of transactions amid suspicions of elder financial exploitation. It proved challenging, yet Walter was versed in the system's gaps. He'd long abandoned trust in the legal system, but for Ellie's sake, he was prepared to revive his old skills. "Brace yourself for the fallout," he said while they executed the documents. "I've always been set for it. I just hadn't realized." Afterward, Ellie headed to the shop, picked up a fresh journal with a crimson cover, and began compiling what would become her concluding record. Not for tears, but for the facts. On the opening sheet, she inscribed, "To my boy Jackson, I brought you into the world through agony from my body. I offered you my existence with affection, yet you stripped my honor without a second thought. This isn't vengeance, it's equity. And equity is the sole thing remaining for me to depart this life serenely. Over in Rome, Jackson and Tanya kept up their facade of bliss. They posted pictures every day, shot clips with effects, and flaunted meals whose names they couldn't utter. Still, the strain was becoming more apparent. Tanya avoided the bed now. Rhonda remained glued to her device. Jackson sensed a vital element fading, akin to a persistent inner warning that blared endlessly. One evening, as he scanned his inbox for travel bookings, he stumbled upon a concealed directory. It held an unintended archive of Tanya's exchanges with someone else. Initially, he dismissed it as junk, but curiosity led him to click through, exposing what was meant to stay private. Tanya were nearly there with it all. The fool has no clue. Touch base and the funds. Tanya, finished. Soon as we're home, we ditch him. Touch base. What if he discovers it? Tanya, doesn't matter. Let him crumble. I'm done with a guy who reeks of a broken, lonely parent. Jackson's gut twisted violently. He shut down the laptop, kept silent, and feigned rest. Sleep eluded him entirely that night. For the first time in ages, his mind wandered to his mom, to her tone, how she dubbed him her little one, despite his height surpassing hers, her creamy rice treat, her chuckles at vintage monochrome comedies, her gentle hand on his brow during illness, and her words, "No one will ever cherish you as I do." He yearned to reach out, but refrained. Ellie, on her end, harbored no hopes. Her anticipation lacked warmth now, replaced by strategy. She toured agencies, placed inquiries, and triggered the migration provision. She flagged Jackson's dealings as dubious. The process dragged, yet it kicked in. A global notice went out regarding his re-entry to the U.S. No prison awaited, but responsibility would demand his presence. In the Crimson Journal, Ellie noted, "No form of fairness is more thorough than one dispensed in silence. I'll observe him forfeit it all without stirring. Fate isn't settled through force. It's dispensed through endurance." Thus, the second treachery didn't shatter her. It forged her into something more resilient, more detached, more liberated. The parent within faded, while the individual emerged. It was merely days before Jackson's U.S. homecoming, oblivious to the seismic shift awaiting. Jackson figured torment was a realm of flames, torment, and cries. He never envisioned it as frigid as Rome's paved alleys or as mortifying as a rejected card amid sightseers in a eatery. The unraveling began with a refused swipe at the register, followed by more refusals. Within under 2 days, he stood penniless. No funds, no viable balances, facing 2 women who eyed him like a street vagrant they'd regrettably collected. Tanya unleashed her fury on him publicly amid a crowd of onlookers frozen in place. "You worthless fool! Where's the cash? I warned you against relying on that destitute old lady. You've ruined us completely." Jackson attempted a response, but no phrases could clarify the inexplicable. He grasped only that disaster had struck, the assets locked, his identity tied to a cross-border monetary scam probe, requiring embassy attendance come morning. That evening, Rhonda regarded him with disdain, laced with irritation. "I told you, Tanya. This wretched soul can't even handle basic chores. Heading to a shelter. No way I'm crashing here." Tanya trailed after. No farewell, no utterance. Jackson lingered solo in the lodging, beside a partially packed bag, the sting of disloyalty humming in his head. Back in Los Angeles, Ellie was threading the final strands of her scheme, much like crafting a heavy winter coverlet. It all aligned. Each step held logic. Walter assisted in compiling the "to trigger the international asset freeze." Required paperwork was submitted based on the report of unauthorized access to an elderly individual's finances. He reached out to a longtime associate of Walter's, Mr. Ernest, who served as a federal operative in the IRS's Criminal Investigations Unit and successfully triggered a warning for illegal asset transfers, mandating scrutiny whenever Jackson crossed into U.S. soil. This wasn't about vengeance. Resentment played no role. It was purely about accountability. In her crimson journal, she jotted down, "At times, a parent's affection must sting, not from bitterness, but to impart a vital truth, since unchecked actions persist, and persistence breeds decay. I didn't raise a criminal, yet life molded him into one. If it's my duty to halt his path, then I'll step up." Brenda supported her quietly amid much of that process. She transcended the role of mere neighbor. She evolved into her ally. "Does it ache, Ellie?" "Absolutely it does. It feels like ripping away my own flesh. Yet some hurts mend deeper wounds." Jackson's embassy encounter turned into a humiliating ordeal. Officials directed him to a chilly, barren chamber alongside a junior attorney and an interpreter, delivering words in a robotic manner. They detailed an ongoing U.S. allegation, the assets locked under a preventive directive, and the obligation to explain upon his homecoming. Jackson emerged looking broken. His world seemed to shatter. Memories of his mother surfaced. After years, he recalled her tone, her gaze, realizing she was behind it all. Then, like a bewildered youngster, he phoned her. "Mom," he uttered the instant she picked up. In her kitchen, Ellie sorted black-eyed peas using the aged colander, acting as if life flowed normally. She knew the voice right away. Her fingers shook slightly, but she held the receiver steady. "Mom, what have you done? They've stripped me bare. I'm on my own." "Tanya's gone. Rhonda as well. They claim it's your doing." Ellie paused, inhaled steadily, then responded in a calm, resolute tone from a realm Jackson could no longer enter. "I didn't strip you of anything, my boy. I merely ended what you were stealing from me." "Mom, they're coming for me. You promised you'd stand by me forever." "I did, right up until you abandoned yourself. Please save me. I'm lost on what to do next. Grow from it." She ended the call, offered no further words, no sobs, no regrets, no justifications. For the first time, she permitted herself to believe her child required hardship to grasp reality. For pain, occasionally, instructs better than tenderness. That evening, sleep evaded Ellie, not from torment, but as she settled to compose a message for him, not a goodbye, rather an heartfelt legacy, one she'd tuck into the journal's final sheet, meant for him upon his eventual arrival. "My beloved Jackson, you fueled my daily awakenings. You embodied my battle, my resilience, my joy. I shared all I possessed and what I lacked. I sacrificed meals, slumber, companionship for your sake, and I harbor no remorse. It stemmed from pure devotion. But you lost sight of your roots. You immersed in illusions draped in lavish scents, and in their rush to bury me while I breathed, they compelled my revival. Hatred for you. Impossible. But I'm done being the quiet figure awaiting your recollection of me. Now I guide you, pain be damned. Should genuine remorse ever strike you, these words await. Not to rescue, but to ensure you can't claim ignorance of the warning." At the letter's close, she sketched a tiny heart. It marked the tenderest remnant she held. Jackson roamed Rome's lanes without direction. He crashed in budget lodgings. Meals came sporadically. No contacts remained. Tanya and Rhonda ignored him. He understood his U.S. re-entry wouldn't be smooth. It loomed as a catastrophe. At last he boarded a flight back, gripped by fear, disgrace, and a chill deep in his core. He anticipated no embraces, only unresolved obligations. Ellie, meanwhile, stood prepared. Her condition worsened, yet her spirit shone brighter. Before chemotherapy could claim her locks, she clipped them off in the bathroom using tailor's shears. Facing the reflection, she declared, "This reflects my true self now." Walters joined her for the final medical visit. The physician verified the malignancy's swift progression. She acknowledged it with a nod. "I've never dreaded death," she noted. "The real sting was departing unsettled. But today, I depart balanced." That night, in her solitary bed, a fierce twinge gripped Ellie's chest. She curled up, yet summoned no aid. She simply cradled herself, whispering her boy's name, not in accusation, but imparting. The storm's hush embodied precisely that, the precise instant prior to ruin, the deceptive tranquility heralding the unavoidable. But Ellie welcomed the finale undaunted, for she had accomplished what she was compelled to fulfill her duty, and Jackson was on the verge of confronting the wreckage of the existence he had personally shattered. As the aircraft touched down in the United States, Ellie experienced a profound numbness. The pilot's greeting failed to stir her, nor did the unfamiliar tongue interwoven with the bustling terminal broadcasts. The towering glass structures and the array of alien expressions around her held no interest. Her journey wasn't for sightseeing. It was a mission to seal a chapter, not in her role as a parent, but merely as an observer. Nearing 70, her frame quivered. It was true, yet fear played no part. Bodily discomfort had long since blended into her routine. What fueled her onward was resolve. To afford the fare, she had parted with several possessions: the kitchen mixer, the expansive parlor-looking glass, and a band she had treasured since Jackson's youth. No remorse shadowed her choice. The monetary sacrifice paled beside the liberation of spirit she pursued. At the terminal, Walter stood ready to receive her. He had preceded her by a full day, orchestrating the details. Leveraging connections, he had secured approvals and ensured Ellie's attendance at the diplomatic office during Jackson's deposition. Legally, her presence wasn't mandated, but the attaché, a longtime acquaintance and offspring of a lone parent, grasped the plea with minimal elaboration. Spotting her approach, Walter doffed his cap. "You hardly seem like someone bracing to confront her own child." "And you scarcely resemble a former attorney," Ellie shot back, avoiding his gaze. "Are you certain of this path?" "I'm still breathing. That suffices." They proceeded to the vehicle. En route, Walter attempted to lighten the mood with light-hearted tales, but Ellie remained detached. Conversation wasn't her aim. A final obligation awaited. Tucked in her handbag rested a sturdy manila packet containing objects devoid of fiscal worth, yet burdened with timeless significance. Across town, in a modest inn suite, Jackson gazed into the reflection. His gaze hollowed, stubble unkempt, his features alternating between weariness and dread. He prepared to report to the U.S. consulate to execute a formal affidavit detaching him from the shared finances with his mother. Yet he recognized that this act would confess to handling those funds via fabricated papers. In return, authorities promised no immediate detention, instead placing him under fiscal surveillance, with his re-entry to America contingent on conditions. Upon U.S. territory, he would need to appear before a monetary oversight body. Descending to the foyer, he noticed Tanya lingering. She sported opaque shades and an ill-fitting crimson jacket. Her demeanor betrayed neither affection nor bitterness, merely pragmatism. "You're behind schedule," she snapped irritably. "I wasn't aware you'd show, nor did you realize your own incompetence. Yet here we find ourselves. What do you seek? To witness your downfall." Jackson's hands balled into knots. Her barbs no longer pierced. The true sting lay in permitting himself to be reshaped by a partner who viewed him as expendable. Reaching the consulate, staff directed them to a stark, hushed anteroom, furnished with steel seats. Tanya worked her chewing gum like a casual shopper. Jackson perspired profusely. Each second dragged like an eternity. Abruptly, the entrance swung wide, and Ellie appeared. Clad in a muted cardigan, an ankle-length frock, and a navy shawl draped across her back, her thinning locks concealed beneath an ebony kerchief. She advanced with deliberate, unyielding steps. Clutching the manila packet, she traversed the space. Her glance locked with Jackson's. He rose abruptly. "What brings you here?" he demanded, tone fracturing. I've come to observe your signature, not as your parent, but as a bystander." Tanya erupted in a grating chuckle. How touching. The elder lady arrives for her closing performance. Ellie regarded her not with malice but compassion. "You've stripped her of all she possessed," she murmured softly, "yet I instilled in him something you'll never reclaim." "Forgiveness," Tanya derided. "Forgiveness, madam, your offspring is a flop. You nurtured a leech." "No, I fostered a fine young man. You corrupted him into this version, and he permitted it." Jackson squeezed his eyelids shut. He endured no more. "Mother, I can't pinpoint when I strayed." Ellie drew near, extending the packet. "Inside are your snapshots, the earliest from your toddling and scribbling days, your inaugural note to Father Christmas. You once wished for a bike, and I conditioned it on an A in arithmetic. You earned it. I honored my word, my boy." Jackson accepted it, fingers quaking. "And enclosed, too, is the missive I penned for you, not to redeem you, but to ensure you can't claim ignorance of warnings." They took seats. The consular representative entered, outlining the process. Jackson inscribed his name. In that instant, a U.S. visitor's device, cued for his travel document, captured snippets of the concluding exchange. The footage depicted Ellie upright, tears glistening, uttering, "You embodied my world, yet I never claimed yours. Now I comprehend. You entered life not to cherish me, but to reflect my image." The clip surfaced online that very afternoon. In a few within minutes, the video exploded across the internet. Comments poured in from everywhere. "What a regal mom. That's real discipline, no need for force. True grace endures forever." Jackson hung his head low. The authorities regarded him with a touch of pity. "We're finished here. You're free to leave. Your mother as well." Tanya was long gone by then. She hadn't lingered for a soul. She had swept out in a huff, just like she'd burst in, unapologetic and fierce. Heading back to their lodging, Ellie and Jackson strolled quietly along a tight alley in Rome. At one intersection, she halted. "Here's where our paths diverge." "Mom," he started, but the word caught in his throat. "I poured my heart into you, even holding back my words. Now I'm offering the one gift you keep pushing away, honesty. Can you find it in you to pardon me?" "I've already let it go," she replied. "The real issue is you haven't eased up on yourself. Is there something I can do?" "Absolutely. Carry the weight of your choices and turn it into purpose." Ellie pivoted and departed at a measured pace. They never crossed paths again. That evening, alone in his quarters, Jackson unsealed the packet. The images inside had faded to a pale yellow, yet remained whole. The note, penned in deep blue, carried a faint whiff of lavender. As he absorbed its contents, reality hit him like a storm. He dropped to his knees and sobbed, tears flowing freer than they had since his boyhood days, not over the repercussions, but raw embarrassment. Deep down, he realized he'd forfeited something irreplaceable, a parent's honor, and that kind of reckoning, delivered by the person who cherished him deepest, cuts the sharpest. Jackson flew back to America quietly, unburdened by luggage, vows, or triumphs. He glided through immigration like a shadow, no flashes from photographers, no kin to greet him, no queries about his ordeal. The sole remnants he carried were the faded bundle of boyhood snapshots and the message from his mom. Everything else vanished. LAX appeared more drab than usual. The atmosphere hung thick and oppressive, as though his remorse lingered in the very air. He had no destination in mind. Tanya ignored his rings. His spouse's parent had cut off every line of contact, and old workmates feigned ignorance of his face. His downfall had spread online, ridiculed by masses, labeled the selfish offspring who'd pilfered from his own flesh to fund a lavish jaunt with his partner and her relatives across the Atlantic. He wandered the blocks of his childhood turf. South Central hadn't shifted. The familiar craters in the roads, the scrawls on the buildings, The vendors hawking wares as twilight fell, all unchanged, yet deep within he was altered. Each corner whispered reminders, ghosts of the past, silent judgments. He lingered by his former classroom building. Memories flooded back of Ellie leading him by the hand, her work smock reeking of cleaner, her footwear threadbare from wear. She'd often declare, "You'll rise above mopping like I do. You'll claim a corner office in fine attire." And for a spell, he did, until betrayal supplanted it all. Ellie had made her way home already. She'd come back solo. Solitude suited her fine. She'd thrived in quiet companionship her entire existence, and it never burdened her. She eased into her modest dwelling with its fractured plaster and unyielding slab floors, plus the old seat that groaned under her gentle rocking. It felt like slipping back into a space she'd never meant to abandon. Walter dropped off her remedies. Brenda whipped up gentle broths. Nearby folks took turns checking on her, unprompted. Not at her bidding, but because integrity deserves tribute even in the here and now. She turned into local folklore. Kids imagined she'd journeyed afar to chasten the cruel, or wielded spells like a sorceress, or stared down gangs. Just a handful grasped the facts, and they kept silent. Ellie remained mostly hushed. She'd tune into soulful tunes come evening. Occasionally, from her threshold, she'd gaze at the young ones frolicking outside. She'd chuckle along. She'd hand out sweets hanging on their tails of youthful fibs. Serenity had returned to her, though vitality hadn't. The illness crept onward, unhurried but relentless. Each passing week left her frailer. Her garments hung loose. Her grip quivered wider. Still, she roamed her home without pause. She refused to yield. On a mild Sunday dawn, Jackson approached the entrance. He clutched a sack of pastries. The prior night had dragged in turmoil, debating his choice. Sleep evaded him, food too, but an inner pull insisted. He didn't anticipate an answer at the knock. He simply yearned for a glimpse. Confirmation she still drew breath. From across the way, he spotted her in the swaying seat. An aged pullover and wrap cloaked her frame. Her features had sharpened, yet held no surrender. She beamed at some youngsters nearby at play. One offered a bloom snatched from the green space. She embraced the child like family of her own. Jackson stayed put on his side. He observed from afar. A lump swelled in his neck, so he drifted onward, placed the treats by the steps, and vanished. Ellie kept her eyes downcast, though she sensed his presence. The entry stayed shut. Not then. In the ensuing days, Jackson came back, sticking to the identical one evening. He abandoned a small offering at her doorstep. Blooms, baked treats, a message bereft of a signature. He lacked the courage to rap on the door. He never sought permission to step inside. He possessed no claim. He simply settled the obligation, oblivious to whether the tally would ever close. That particular night, Ellie retrieved her crimson journal, flipped to its concluding sheet, and with shaky fingers inscribed her parting words. It was brief, concise, mirroring her essence. My boy, affection isn't seized, it's bestowed freely. Should you grasp that truth, you're no longer adrift. Refrain from seeking me once I've departed. I'll reside in each error you elect to avoid. In each gesture of compassion you offer sans anticipation of reward. To absolve yourself, begin by pardoning those around you. And should you one day glimpse your mother in another's gaze, do not disappoint her. That shall serve as my absolution. She appended her complete name. She creased the missive, sealed it within an envelope, and scrawled in ebony script to Jackson. The dawn when her breath ceased was luminous. Rays of sunlight poured through the panes. Resting upon her knees lay the scarlet journal, the sealed packet, and a coverlet crafted by her skilled fingers. The locals discovered her encircled by blossoms deposited by the young ones. Her expression radiated a tranquility rare to counterfeit. Absent was any theatrics, no wails, merely the peace succeeding turmoil. Walter was the initial arrival. He regarded her wordlessly, tenderly shut her lids. Tears eluded him. He recognized her aversion to weeping. He understood she had passed as she had existed, with poise. Brenda orchestrated the vigil, aided by the community. It remained modest, yet brimming with warmth. They spurned ornate floral tributes, embracing only part-gathered petals, youthful sketches, and the melodies she cherished. Jackson received no alert, yet he sensed it. He perceived the instant the breeze shifted, and a void bloomed within his heart. He hastened to the dwelling, beheld the ajar entrance, and advanced cautiously. Tapers flickered in the parlor. None barred his path, none embraced him. He approached his mother's form. He dropped to his knees. He caressed her palms. They felt icy. Beside her rested the packet bearing his name. He unsealed it. He recited each phrase softly to himself in the hush. He wept, yet differently from prior times. His sobs were muted, akin to hers. In a nook of the space sat an uncovered cedar chest. Within lay a snapshot of him in boyhood, accompanied by an inscription on its reverse. "I continue to trust in you, my child." Jackson claimed the image, clutched it to his torso, then ventured to the garden and claimed the seat she once favored. He gazed heavenward and realized he had forfeited his parent, but maybe he might yet reclaim his own path. Weeks afterward, a local remarked that the fellow delivering the donuts had chosen to remain in the abode. He acquired no fresh furnishings or extravagances, entertained no guests, merely retained a weathered seat, the ruby journal, and a framed picture upon the ledge. Departures carve voids. Those who linger may populate them with recollections or at times with renewal. Enjoyed the tale. From which town are you tuning in? Share in the replies below. Should the narrative resonate, consider a super thanks to help sustain these tales. Your kind backing means the world. Eager for your thoughts on the piece. Visible on display are a pair of fresh biographies I endorse strongly. My channel holds even more gems. Remember to hit subscribe. Until the upcoming biography, with affection and regard.